let me introduce today's speakers. The first one is Mary Linneman, and I met Mary really kind of for the first time the other day, and we have a great deal in common, I think. She grew up in Connecticut. She was educated by the Good Sisters of Mercy. Moved to Athens for college. How many of you can say this? Fell in love with the town and never left. There are a lot of us here. She graduated from UGA in '97, and before she came to Harvard, had a dual position at the Athens Regional Library, where she was both a branch manager for the Winterville Library and also did design work for their website. She came to the Harvard Library in October of 2006, and you will see today you will see Mary in action. She runs the imaging lab and does graphic design, production for the exhibits here. She did the Curtis exhibit of the Native Americans that you'll see outside. She does all the production for the exhibits, and it's a busy, busy, busy job. She's married, and she has 4 boys. So when she leaves here... Oh, I'm sorry, four-legged boys, yes. But she's busy, yes. And the 4-legged kind are just as busy as the other kind. So that's why she stays so thin. Stephen was born in Columbus, Ohio, and grew up with a love of local history, architecture. He has a BA in literature from Ohio State University and worked as a staff at the Ohio State University Library. Then he got a master's in library science from the University of Michigan. He married Teresa. Where'd Teresa go today? There she is. Who has a BA in horticulture at Ohio State, and don't use common names around her. They moved to Athens to accept a faculty appointment as a science librarian in 1979, and then moved to Harvard in 2000 to direct the University Archives and Records Management. He's semi-retired, focus on the semi, as the University Archivist Emeritus in 2008, and has continued to work part-time at Harvard. He's been our historian on the Athens Historical Society Board since 2012, and I cannot explain to you what a wonderful, wonderful thing it is to work with the board on the Athens Historical Society. It's the members, the board. It's never boring, and sometimes it's contentious. I will tell you that these people they're serious about their history, and we get kind of locked sometimes, but it is a wonderful, wonderful board of very hardworking people. Stephen.
Do you think so? We can turn it down a bit. Well, I'm a little bit disappointed that Ashley didn't get to telling you why I am slim, but I'm sure she would have liked to have done that much. Ashley did present one of those great benefits a few moments ago of being in this group. I see so much authority and knowledge as I look out in this audience. The best part about being in a relaxed group like the Athens Historical Society is the shout-out feature. People will shout out genteelly if they find that you're making an error. And there may be errors today, so I'll rely. We've got one of Athens' greatest cheering sections here in the front row to correct me if I make a mistake. But when we adjourn later to go down into the room and actually see the maps, I encourage you to make observations or ask questions of the person next to you, because you're going to be in one of the most knowledgeable gatherings that you will ever be with in one room regarding Athens. And that's one reason to consider joining the Athens Historical Society. Well, I'm glad there's a big turnout. This was so beautiful a day. I almost didn't come, but Ashley did bully me into it. And we're here to look at a rather ethnocentric program. Now, several times I am going to stop, as with the magazine, to do a public service announcement. I'd like to start with one. One of the great benefits you all enjoy if you're from the Athens area is 4 great repositories to house, preserve, and make available to people under safe conditions rare materials like the maps we're looking at today. There's the Hargret Rare Book and Manuscripts, the Brown Media, which works with many home films and town films for local interest, the Russell Political Library, which is preserving the 20th and 21st century to keep everybody honest in the 22nd. And then there is also at the Athens Regional Library the Heritage Room, which is the genealogical powerhouse of this end of Georgia. And we are very grateful to Van Burns and Angela Stanley, who's in here somewhere, way in the back, and Beth Whitlock, here from the Athens Regional Library today to fix this whole presentation into posterity with the video cameras. We all cooperate together to preserve history, and we encourage you to help us in this. The only reason why you're going to see these maps today is because people have stopped on their way to sell something at the trade shop, give it, disperse it to the nephews in Oklahoma who don't care about it, or worst of all, carry it out to the dumpster. Because people have thought twice and put something in a major repository like the Hargret, like the Heritage Room, where many people can come and review materials under safe conditions and learn about the future. Because of that, because of your efforts, that material is here. As we always point out to people, we don't have, I think, but one issue of the major 19th century African American newspaper in Athens. The trunk liner or drawer liner that you find in an old chest might be just the most exciting thing that any of our repositories have seen all week, so keep an eye open for what you might spot in the odd places. Well, as I said, this is very ethnocentric today. I wanted to start by saying Athens Historical Society, while we have many terrific colleagues in historical societies around us, we also sort of think of ourselves as the old Franklin County Society. We're interested in the activities of all the counties around us. We are interested in their historical societies' activities because we're interested really in all the places that have influenced Athens and the places that Athens influences. However, today we're going to stick right within the boundaries of Clarke County, except for a short excursion because of historical accidents into Oconee. All right, well, let's begin with a completely faked map. This is one I've made up, and this is actually based on a map that we don't even own. We have a copy, but this is in the archives in Morrow, the state archives. This is an 1869 map of Clarke County, and we're going to look at it in more detail later, but I wanted to bring it up here initially to show one of the really interesting features that makes Clarke County so special. If you're heading up country, one of the best routes from Augusta, if you've gone up to the fall line, out into the Cherokee country, is the road between the Broad River and the Oconee River drainage system. Route 78 up from Washington comes up to an ideal point between the drainage of the Broad and the Oconee, where there is what was called Cedar Shoals. I hope that doesn't arouse high school rivalries in here, but that is what it's called. Right down at the bottom of Oconee Street, where there is a natural shoals where people can cross. You can't see it much anymore because of all the dams down there, but I suspect that from time immemorial, this was a major route out into the North Country. And so it's not unusual that in the 1790s, Dan Easley and other settlers came to this excellent place, a power source, and set up a little crossing village down at the shoals. Now here's another map from the State Archives in Morrow. This is of frontier forts. This shows Athens before Athens, and as I mentioned, the major routes at this time are the Broad River. The Oconee River is really too long to be a very convenient way to get into the back country here. It's easier to go up the Savannah and out the Broad. So as you can see, nobody is really interested in Athens. Everything's showing up along the Broad River at this point in 1793. This makes Mary happy because this is her territory. If we go to a closer section now, this is the left-hand side of the map where we do see the mighty Oconee, the South Fork, now the Appalachie. People are always asking why. Actually, it's not. There's the Appalachie. And they've identified the middle as the South Fork. Nomenclature is fluid at this point, folks. The Appalachie eventually becomes called the South Fork for a time, long enough to make this the Middle Oconee, and that's the North Oconee, and then we changed the name and left everybody wondering why we call it the Middle Oconee when there ain't no South Oconee. But what you can see out here is, right about in here is that Cedar Shoals crossing. Here comes Sandy Creek down, and what do we have in 1793 out here? We have Fort Matthews down south of town, and Barnett Station that the Barnett family of Barnett Shoals fame established. So we have a federal fort and a private fort. And then there is this Fort Blackburn up here on Sandy Creek, and I know nothing about that whatsoever. So this is Athens before there's Athens, but shortly after, there are going to be people coming around this shoals here. To the point where in 1801, when the gentleman from the University Committee came out here in this sufficiently misty atmospheric blur that I've blown up from a very famous painting we're going to see later, what they found, not quite this busy, but up Oconee Street, the river would be down here, and going up Oconee Street, just follow the mules, a handful of houses. Down at the bottom, we have the mills, sawmill, grist mill, a very extensive industrial development for 1801, all owned by that entrepreneur of the Western frontier, Daniel Easley. And of course, what the committee does, that is looking for a place for a university, is come to this Cedar Shoals crossroads, and they find that there's an excellent spring right back here with a source of good water. And then just out of the picture to the left, there's a nice tall hillside way up from the miasmas that spread disease. Perfect place for a university. And so John Millage buys over 600 acres of land and gives it to the University of Georgia, which is odd because, of course, we were funded with land. We had lots of it, but this was really nice land. Now, about 30 seconds after Josiah Meigs arrived in town, the university got down to its business, which was to start subdividing that land and selling it off to raise money for the university along Front Street, today's Broad Street. Now, this is sort of odd. Most places, cities can proudly say a college came to us. We can proudly say a city came to our university. We really were here first. Well, by about 1805, those suspicious boys in the Capitol building wanted to know just what was being done with their money, so the Senatus Academicus ordered Josiah Meigs, our brilliant second president, who had been a surveyor in New Haven, Connecticut when he was up at Yale, surveyed their cemetery, a rather famous one in cemetery development. They charged him and the most active member of the Board of Trustees, the Reverend Hope Hall, known as the Broad Axe Preacher because of his take no prisoners style of preaching. And they were told to go out and do a survey of the town, which they did. This is what they came up with. It's tipped in the minutes of our Board of Trustees, and you can see it in the display case just outside the room here. This is the earliest map of Athens, 1805. And what do we see here? Well, here's the college building. Someone later has hopefully written in old, just in case you needed that orientation. This is why we laminate things. The president's house is here, about where the academic building is. A grammar school to prep students who weren't ready for the big university. And over here, we have Mr. Hall's house, Dan Easley's house that was sold to Hope Hall. The town spring is right here, flowing down, and this is what you can still see flowing along down to William Street in places. Although the central duplicating is on top of the spring itself, the landscape department fortunately has restored a nice little stretch of it, and I'm told that someday when central duplicating comes down, they hope to bring the spring back. If only because every time it rains, they have water coming up through the floorboards. Now, across Front Street, here comes Oconee Street up, and it still bends just the way it does. running into Thomas, and along here you have Front Street, Broad Street, and you have Clayton. The blocks are sold all the way through in big squares initially. A lot of people get confused and think there's a lost alleyway here. This would be Clayton Street, but no. This is Front, Clayton, and Washington. And once again, some vandal has written that in with pencil, but they're sure they meant well. Now, later on, Hope Hall and Josiah Meigs became bitter enemies. Maybe surveying a town can do that to you. I don't know. We don't know. Eventually, their conflict led to the firing of Josiah Meigs in 1811, I think, and Hope Hall was a major factor in that. Both great men who contributed enormously to the university, though. And as far as we know, at this point in their career, they were getting along, although on the back of the map, we do find this, and they are in different hands, and we really don't know if this is a hint of problems to come. But it's really not fair to either. Well, Athens kept on growing and growing till it was, well, probably a mighty little village, but we were proud of it. By 1815, we had good reason to be proud because that was the year that the state recognized us as the town of Athens. And as part of the town of Athens, we were allowed to survey boundaries using the popular circular boundary system of the day. We started, don't look at that. We started at the center of the chapel, not the chapel we know today, but the earlier wooden chapel from 1807 that Hope Hall helped get erected here. And we were to survey 1 mile out in all directions from the north bank of the river to the south bank of the river, and then the border went down the river. Sorry, East Athens folks like Gary Doster. At this point, East Athens, if I'm understanding their terms correctly, was not included. But then again, there wasn't things to attract people over there like a railroad yet. We'll see how that changes. Now, do not look, therefore, at the yellow line or the elegantly drawn yellow numbers. Just look at the red outline, because that is our first boundaries, Athens of 1815. I think. This is how I'm interpreting it. Now, the town kept on developing. This is the first map that we really have that shows much of the town at all. First one we have after 1805. If any of you got any maps to fill in these gaps, let me know. But this is called the Newton map because it has property of E. Newton written on it. It is strictly a map of the old portion of town. There actually had been new lots laid off over to here by this time, but he wanted to see who was currently the owner. As you see, most of the lots are still from block to block all the way through, but you can see down around College how we're starting to subdivide into a lot of different businesses and smaller lots. Very crude drawing of the campus over here. This man was not a surveyor. I think it is interesting, though, that Town Spring still shows up. It's still of importance in around 1833, 1834. And, of course, Athens is showing that it's booming as a population center of the Great West because it now boasts a graveyard. This would, of course, be the old Athens Cemetery over on Jackson Street. When you see this down in the room, it'll pay to pay attention to some of the buildings on campus because there's some interesting variations in there that lets us date this map from between 1832 and 1836. Now, by 1846, we come to this famous painting, which you can also see on display in the showcase across from the entrance to the auditorium. This is George Cook's View of Athens, 1846, from Carr's Hill. And you probably all are oriented to this. This is Carr's Hill on the east side. We have the river crossing, not at Oconee Street, but still on piers over the old Cedar Shoals, I think. So it sort of throws people off. People have often said, well, clearly this man did not know anything about perspective. No, I think that's dead wrong. It's just they weren't expecting the bridge to be over here where people used to cross, probably on the rocks. What you can see is Athens is growing with some very fine houses up here, particularly in the Thomas Street area. If you've read The Tangible Past in Athens, Georgia, you've read a lot about Thomas Street. in Charlotte Marshall's chapter. Over here, the shining city on the hill, the university on the opposite side from the town, Spring. Chapel is a little mysterious because it still has its bell tower. Old College still has its semicircular ventilator, which I wish they'd put back, but they're not listening to me on that. Probably what was originally the trail heading on out Baldwin Street-ish towards Cherokee country. And of course, down here, Athens' booming mill industry. We're becoming a major power site. And probably most glorious of all, our fairly new railway. Except, of course, at this point, the railway does not cross the river. No sense building a bridge when you've already got one you can take carriages across. So, as occurred until the 1880s, the railroad stops on the other side of the river, but becomes very important. So Athens is growing like crazy, as you can see. Down on Broad Street, the university is putting on a fine veneer of gentility, as we can see in this picture from about 1856. You can also see a big blow-up of this lithograph out in the showcase. Very, very fine dressing people. I always like the smoking Irishman here with his cigar and the sideburns. If you look at it closely outside, you almost would reckon these are real people that they painted in. And I think this was done by somebody on site, as opposed to the more familiar Gleason's View that you've all seen engraved, because Gleason's View obviously is just fantasy forest in front of the university, whereas this one is exact. There's the Tombs Oak with the top snapped out of it. In fact, look at all the trees. This person is an obsessive compulsive when it comes to pruning. So I think this was a real drawing. And one of my favorite things I like to point out is you'll notice the trees obscure Lestrade House. If you're familiar with the Gleason's print, the person who cut that print, who I think probably had never been south of Bayonne, New Jersey, was told by their editor to lose the trees. Well, he could only conceive of Lestrade House as being this 3-story, 40-window behemoth back there. So people are always looking at the Gleasons and saying, when did they tear that thing down? Now, even though Athens is very sophisticated, you'll notice we still have a pre-iron fence up to keep the hogs and pigs and cows and chickens out of campus. You have to go over a stile, which must have been pretty challenging in those beautiful dresses. You also have stone walks to take you across the muddy roads. Nonetheless, you'll notice our roads are good enough that our carriages only need 3 wheels. So this gentle, growing, booming educational and industrial center in 1840 gets raised to the status of city by state act, City of Athens. And at that time, we are told to draw our boundaries let's stop. Wait. Yes, we're allowed to draw the boundaries 1 mile in all directions. So we take in the east side of Athens down. Of course, that helps us take in that railroad that's going to be coming into town in a few years. So suddenly the east side, along with the industrial sites on Trail Creek and all, has become very important, and we're starting to see development over there. So take the line all the way around 1 mile now from our current chapel. So 1847, December 18th, we have become politically unstable. We're getting so crowded, so that we are told to divide our city into 3 wards for the first time. And that's what these yellow lines in the interior and my badly sketched Victorian numbers indicate. Ward 1 over to Thomas Street and a line straight down, pretty much bisecting the city. Ward 3 up in the Cobham area. Ward 2 in the just now starting to grow lower part of Cobham, or south part of the area. And this gives us some idea of where people are concentrated. Not many people on the east side, but everybody's downtown. That's where the houses still are. Cobham's pushing the edge a little bit. Tom and Hal and all the boys out there. This is still pretty empty, so it's a big chunk of land. By the way, of course, this is laid on an 1874 map, so most of these streets are not even there. Of course, even the streets that are there are hardly there too, because everything's dirt at this point. Well, in the 1840s, thanks to President Alonzo Church, the university is growing in prestige, which means it needs more and more buildings and development. And these 2 gentlemen undertake to raise money for the university, and part of doing that is figuring out just what we own. You all know 19th century deeds. 500 feet from the big red rock, find the cedar tree, go 40 feet north until you find the frog, then turn right. Over the years, we're not really, apparently, entirely certain just what the millage purchase is. So this gentleman, Asbury Hall, son of Reverend Hope Hall, and supposedly the Hall boy who looked the most like his father, we have no portrait of him, Asbury Hall, secretary of the university, wrote to the boys at the Capitol saying, please send us a copy of the deed, and they started trying to work out exactly where the millage purchase boundaries were. Aiding in this was his companion with the university administration, our treasurer, the diabolical-looking William Letcher Mitchell over here, who was apparently a cantankerous person, but also another great contributor to the university. I love the fact that William Letcher Mitchell had a cousin named William Letcher Mitchell who ran the Franklin House. And this generates endless confusion in the 19th century. But the wonderful note about William Letcher here is he was granted the nickname in town of Slickhead. Now, I cannot imagine anybody, except maybe Gus Hall, walking up to this person and saying, hey, Slickhead, how's it going? But William Letcher Mitchell got the teams to working. I don't know if he did the surveying, but his name is on the next great map we have of Athens, which is in terrible condition. You'll get to see the original. This is the 1852 map. Many of you will be more familiar with an 1880 copy that was done of this map for use in the county deed room. This generated lots of confusion between me and researchers as we started, people referring to it as, well, that's the Thomas 1880 map. No, that's the Mitchell 1852 map. It took us a while to work out the nomenclature. This, however, is the original. It's in very bad condition on linen, but holding together pretty well. When you go see the map down there, I have my translation of Mitchell's legend down here, and it details the different steps in surveying and selling the land. If we go to a negative of this, some of these wonders that Mary can do with her magic lab, it shows the numbering a little clearer. You've got the old lots that Dan easily held on to over here. You've got the campus. You've got about where we are sitting right in here. And then you've got the downtown, Cobham, on out Broad Street, with the 19th century convention of the dipsomanic swiggle to indicate creeks. If we go to the fluorescent light version, you can see even better. All of you who had black lights and posters in your dorm rooms in college will enjoy this. This shows a little more clearly with the numbering on the lots. 1 through 67, the original downtown. 1 through 31, the next little bit of survey. Cobham, extra Cobham. The interesting thing here, if you look at the numbers, is once we get up into proper Cobham, John Edison Cobb and the developers up there were no fools. They cut this up in lots of little tiny lots so they could sell them to lots of people. But out here, I guess we were just getting tired of selling land. So when we sold off the remainder of the millage tract, they're huge. By the way, the glowing blue, that is the boundary of the millage survey. But I couldn't even figure out where it went right around in here, so I just skipped it. You can work on that yourselves. Well, this takes us up to 1861. You'll get to see the book that contains this view. This is roughly what Stoneman's raiders would have seen if they hadn't been stopped down at the paper mill. This is a wonderful view. As you can see, Athens is still booming. We've got steeples and spires and business blocks. We've got the university over here. You can still trace your way up to the spring. The caption, and you'll be able to read a little description in this gazetteer-like book. I encourage you to stop and do that. The caption itself is amazed by this bridge that's carried over the Oconee on a laminated timber support system, which is sort of neat. Obviously, someone's drawn this back in their hotel room in the evening, but it's pretty accurate, right down to Trail Creek coming in hard by Oconee Street to the Oconee River. And of course, here is the omnibus bringing all those people over from the railroad station that still ends on the other end of the creek. Well, obviously growth slowed for a little bit for reasons the next 4 years, but after the war, we get back to some of our mapping, and this produces the first really good county map of Clarke County. This is actually the second of two maps from this time. There's an 1868 map we have a copy of, and the fascinating thing about that is it was drawn by Amanda Barnett. And I don't know, I've not researched who Amanda Barnett is, but since the state surveyor at that time is a gentleman named Barnett, I'm suspecting it might be a daughter. Is it? Mary Clay Bonner Award confirms it is his daughter. And isn't that amazing that, we had a woman out surveying for the month of the woman's history. That's kind of a neat factor. But they got her name out of everything when they printed it. This is the 1869 map that was based on it. And what you see here is a little unfamiliar because at this time, Clarke County is both Clarke and Oconee. They have not split yet. It's still all one Clarke County. I'm always astounded when I drive down to Madison to think I would still be driving through Clarke County if it hadn't been for this unfortunate split, which I think probably was to the detriment of both counties ultimately. But it happened, and we'll get to that. Won't really belabor anything. As you see, it's not very useful for Athens. We are 4 squares here, and we were larger. And as I mentioned, the system of the Squiggly Creek is still at play here, so I would not try to follow any of these water courses by this map. But it's pretty neat showing the early roads down through the county. Well, we were growing, and a few years after, we thought we were big enough to be on our own. The map was 1869. In 1872, we split off. We had a state act passed in 1871, specifying that on the first day of January 1872, Clarke County's county seat would move from Watkinsville to Athens. The county government would be centered in the old town hall on Washington Street, and we were entitled to sell off the courthouse and indeed even tear out the ironwork from the jail in the jail down in Watkinsville in order to upgrade what they termed as the calaboose in the old town hall so we could hold our prisoners. In very short order though, Colonel Charbonnier, Professor Charbonnier of the university's engineering school designed this courthouse that stood about where Wendy's and the Bottle Works towards Wendy's that end of the lot stood at the head of Barber Street for many years. Those of you who are graduates of Athens High School will remember when this was Athens High School with some wings added. But this became the Clarke County seat of government in short order. And you can still see the jail over there, of course, if you go over behind the T.R. Cobb House, its new location. Well, on January 1st, 1872, we became the county seat. On January 3rd, 1872, the local newspapers report that a petition has been started in southeastern Clarke County to create a new county with Watkinsville as a county seat. So I don't know what irritated them. Maybe it was taking the iron for the calaboose, but that evidently rankled them to the point where the correspondent named Trusty reports on June 6, 1873 about conditions in the, as he terms it, the anticipated county. We have a good deal of courting, but few marriages. We have a great many pretty girls who would make good wives. Trusty goes on to report that we have 2 doctors, 2 storehouses, several shoe stores, and 1 good bar room kept by a clever man where one can find good liquors. He concludes this endorsement of Watkinsville with, talk about taking our courthouse away from us. We will secede first and fight you till the chickens crow for daylight. Chickens crowed in 1875, and the counties were split in 2 along the familiar border down there. How they worked it to chip off this little bit where the Barnett Shoals and the Bloomfield industrial sites were, I don't know, but that was a good bit of business. I think I would have fussed about that, but who knows, I think we felt that with the railroads and all the development, we could hold our own. So that is where it takes its familiar shape. Now I have bumped out a little bit here to indicate the roundel, a little bit of extra land attached when Winterville formed. You'll notice all over Georgia that maps of counties over the years look like a twitching plate full of amoebas. Boundaries are going everywhere, and I'm indebted to our colleague Tom Gresham from the Oglethorpe Historical Society for the reason why this is so. In his wonderful presentation on the Ron Moss mapping of Oglethorpe County, fascinating show at the Athens Regional Library, he mentioned that until fairly modern times, a farmer could petition the state to have all of the land on his farm put into one county or the other. So county boundaries are always wiggling around. So that's why you get this gelatinous view sometimes and say, well, what's my house doing over there? Kind of interesting. Now, Revenge of Oconee County, we covered that. Let me see, I want to make sure. Oh, I did want to mention, on to the next step, actually. 1872, August 24th, 1872, Athens as a county seat gets a new gift from the state, undoubtedly at our petition. 1872, we are made the city of Athens with a 2-mile boundary in all directions. We go out an extra mile of radius all the way around. We are also entitled, and now I want you to all make note of this, we are entitled to require of any citizens in said city of Athens 15 days of labor on the road per year or payment of a $3 fee. I hope you're all current with that. And if not, there are several places right out here on Hall Street where you can get busy filling in with the bus tour. The city, to celebrate, contracted with this young cellist here, a man named W.W. Thomas, whom you all know. He was just out of college. This is taken just a few days or a few years before he got this commission to survey and map the county. At this time, he was mapping and surveying railroads. He later became head of the Southern Mutual Insurance Company and Athens' most noted architect. You're certainly familiar with the Sandy Stovall Chapel that he designed, his own wedding cake house at the corner of Baxter and Millage, a man of architectural genius, and apparently a pretty mean cellist too. He produced the one map we cannot show you, but we wish we could. W.W. Thomas set out to draw with pen and ink on a sheet of paper, which would make a rug for no mean dining room. The first really accurate, grand, complete map of Athens, 1874. Now, this is just a corner of the map. The map is gigantic. It is also sadly glued to a canvas backing or a linen backing and falling apart. We hope we are raising money. Chantel Dunham and Leandra Nessel, the two best friends in development that an archive ever had, are trying to bring together money now through foundations and other places to have this gigantic thing restored, because this is an essential treasure to all of us who are citizens of Athens. Mary, this map is so huge that Mary could not scan it. I repeat, Mary could not scan it. You'll see in a moment why this is astounding. We have talked about hanging her wires over it, sort of in a big Lebowski sort of system, photographic, but and she is fearless. She's gone up in the bucket truck to photograph the dedication plaque at Old College, but I think our insurance people wouldn't allow us to do it.
I was willing to do it, but we were told OSHA did not approve.
Yeah,
So.
we are thwarted at every turn. What we're seeing here, as you can tell, is a little bit of the corner. You can see what wretched condition it's in, but also the incredible detail. These are not fly specks, these are trees. What we're looking at here is Prince Avenue, going out towards Cherokee country. The turn on the Atlanta Road here, today Oglethorpe Avenue. And here on the corner we have the University High School. And not too much longer after that, we've got the Smokes. I don't know if Mr. Smoke would have been running the university farm out back of the University High School, or if he would have been running the one up on Newton Bridge Road. But about that time in the 1890s, the University Farm is out here. This, however, is 1874. Now, the map is in wretched condition, but fortunately, as Ashley mentioned, in 1974, through the energetic leadership of Pat Cooper, the Athens Historical Society, with many people aiding Patricia Cooper, she spearheaded the effort, had a copy of this map engraved by the University of Georgia Cartography Department. It is a superb job. It is so superb that many of us, for years, assumed that there had to be an engraved version. Oh, obviously, after Mitchell drew the giant map, he had a smaller one engraved. No, this is a 1974 creation, right down to, I think, very authentic Victorian lettering. The Athens Historical Society had it printed. We sold copies. As Ashley mentioned, we're trying to make copies available to folks again, particularly for those who don't want one that's big enough to use on their dining room table. But it's an amazing map. Before we rolled up the 1874 manuscript map for the last time, I spent a good couple of hours with this going over it, and I was astounded at how faithful this map is to reproducing the details of Thomas's original. The cartography department did an exceptional job. And I'd always been convinced, well, there has to be things hidden in the original manuscript map. No, not really. It's amazing. Get a little closer in detail, since it's hard to see. What you notice is all sorts of things are going on around Athens here in 1874. We have grown out to the west into the area, still roughly defined by that original millage purchase, if you look, if you remember the zigzags of blue. But other things are going on. For one thing, new rail lines are coming out of town and into town to the north. Definitely increasing our business. The east side is developing around the railroad station over there, Chicopee Mill. The Brooklyn and not Newtown yet, Brooklyn and Allenville, just off the map, are developing. These are new areas that are being settled by African Americans coming to Clarke County, creating neighborhoods, of course, in those segregated days, but neighborhoods that are close in to where they have access to employment, to where the working is, but on the fringe of towns. Out here in the Cabo district, the Buena Vista district is being sketched out, but as you see, Boulevard is still just sort of a dream, as is most of north of town. And down here at 5 Points, well, it's just off the map. At this point, 5 Points only has 4 points, isn't that sad? But there is some growth. It's neat to see the old fairgrounds out here, roughly where the track is today at the university. And the new cemetery out here at the end of Cemetery Street at Coney Hill. Lots of other features. I invite you to look at them yourself on the map that we have down there. It's a fascinating map, and if I were you, I would jump on owning one. There are two big opportunities right now in Athens. One is to own a copy of the map if we get it in reprint. The other is to own Annals of Athens that you can order from. You still have copies? Excellent. Mary Bondurant-Ward, who's our guest here today, has made copies of that amazing history that gives you the people and names behind all these maps. Both of those are great opportunities. Jump on them. I didn't jump fast enough last time Annals was in print, and I've had to wait 30 years to get my copy. So that's another commercial miss. But we hope to make the map available too. And I don't think I need to mention to this group that the third big opportunity is the tangible test. Right? I'll put a pitch for that.
I just want to mention the name of Jim Ingram. He was the one in the cartography department that did all of that precise reproduction.
Is he still around?
No, he died. But he did two things for the Athens Historical Society that we cherish, that and the cemetery map.
Thank you, Charlotte. I wish I had a chance to talk to him about the project, because it's an amazing map. Now, we have many people who are illustrious in history today. I did want to bring up one last slide for a very special guest we have here today, and that is Dr. Hubert McAlexander, who help to kick off the tangible past, the expert on Oconee Street, the expert on the Deering area, and in his honor, I'd like you all to participate in sort of a seventh inning stretch here. Now, Hubert is an agreeable person except for maybe one thing. He despises the fact that the university, thus local papers, everybody keeps referring to that mighty watershed that we're sitting right next to as Tanyard Creek. Sounds very Hoosier, doesn't it? Creek, no. As this map clearly demonstrates to us, the proper name is Tanyard Branch. Now, I would like you all to join with me on the count of three in giving Dr. McAlexander a hearty 1, 2, 3, Tanyard Branch. Thank you. You're welcome, Hubert, and thank you for all of your detective work, which has moved us so far along in history in this town. Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to start off part 2 of the program as we dash up to 1946 with another public service message. This sort of scanning, the reproduction of the map, this is the sort of reason to be involved in the Athens Historical Society. I know most of you here are members. If you're not, I encourage you to join and contribute your labor and work with us so we can continue. If we hadn't fixed that 1874 map, who knows what we would have to work with these days. And now the potential is even greater for preservation than before. And that's what the Athens Historical Society works to do, to help us as citizens fix what we have, preserve what we have, and help create a sense of excitement and love for our city and all our fellow citizens, not just for the history, but for the commitment to this city and this area that will produce a better and better Athens as we go on. Well, let's jump ahead to 1885, and as you can see at the corner of Broad and Lumpkin, traffic congestion is booming in the classic city. We now have the iron fence. Young Harris has overseen the putting in of Harris's Terrace over here. Moore College is up here with, remember Professor Charbonnier who designed the courthouse? There is, up in this area, pretty much blurred out his weather octagon where he's making the first machine-driven weather observations of the city of Athens. So things are going like crazy. We have railroads coming in from every direction. We've even brought the original railroad across the river on the Murmur Trestle, and things are going gangbusters. One of the best ways to ponder this growth is through a whole series of maps, the Sanborn Fire Atlas maps. Is everyone familiar with those? The Sanborn Company produces these maps at 5-year increments, documenting in incredible detail the buildings. In this map of the campus and the downtown, they list off the major shops that are in these buildings. You can see footprint, you can tell what materials they're made out of, stone, brick, or frame. In this transitional view from 1885, you can see how many houses are still down there. This is the Deloney House, where the Deloneys lived, whose wonderful letters are one of the most gripping Civil War era documentations we have in Harvard. And those letters all came to and out of this house right here. The Episcopal Church is still down on the corner where the Holman building is today. Now the wonderful thing is you can then turn to 1889, put the map next to it, and compare and see how it's changing. Fascinating. The problem with the Sanborn fire maps is if it doesn't cost a lot to rebuild it, they don't really care. So people are always frustrated because their house is just beyond the boundaries of where the Sanborn people are mapping. The whole intention of the Sanborn Fire Atlas maps is to sell these to insurance companies so that nobody writes too many insurance policies in one area in those days when whole city blocks burned. So they're really interested in what's flammable. Careful notes about standpipes, water supplies, gasoline tanks, etc., and a lot of concentration on the industrial. Ironically, your magnificent 10-room house in Boulevard may never have gotten on the map, but the 3-room mill house next to the mill building did because They want to make sure that nobody sets fire to the fatback in the kitchen and burns down the mill. So it's a different focus. Now, the wonderful thing about this is, thanks to scanning and the Digital Library of Georgia, our partner, you can go on the Digital Library of Georgia website from your home and pull up any of these maps that are in public domain. That takes you all the way up to 1923. Wonderful resource to play around with. You can kill hours with this. So I endorse the Sanford Firelights maps. Now, 1893, this gentleman looks tired. He looks stressed. He looks weary. And who can blame him? This is Charles Morton Strawn in the 1893 photograph of the faculty, and aided by other people like calm and placid Harry White down here, who helped him, but obviously he wasn't sitting up late at night drawing the maps. Charles Morton Strawn has just produced the first major survey of Clarke County, its industries, its farms, its nature, a wonderful book that you could read here in the Hargrave. When we go down to the map room, well, the ballroom, but I'm going to call it the map room, after you get me to shut up, then you will be able to see a copy of his book. I ask you not to touch anything down there, but please feel free to look inside of his book. It's fascinating. Goes district by militia district. Now, in addition to the wonderful data he fixed in his book about our booming industrial center, he tirelessly sent articles out to magazines about the university, about the city, a great booster. In addition to all this, he produced 2 wonderful maps that went in the back of his brochure. For one thing, it's the first decent map I know of Clarke County. And this is Strawn's 1893 map. By the way, he is a student of Professor Charbonnier, just like W.W. Thomas, the Charbonnier who did the courthouse. The 1893 map is wonderful. It shows the railroads coming in, the new roads going out. It has a large number of farms, mill sites, churches, schools indicated. Wonderful detail. And frankly, this sort of detail about fixtures in the county never appears again. So take some time to savor this down in the map room, because it is wonderful. For those of us who live out in the county and are always irritated by how nobody pays any attention outside the 2-mile line, this is a treasure trove. In addition to the county map, he also did this wonderful up-to-date map of the city of Georgia. And city of Athens. And I think in my babbling along, I forgot to mention, in 1874, when we became a city, we also were elevated to 4 wards. So the yellow lines here are the 1874 wards. And once again, look at what this tells us about the concentration of people. They moved the boundary over for the first ward to Thomas Street now instead of Lumpkin. So it's a little bigger. There's still not a lot of people out here, even though we can see there's a lot of development going on out around the armory, which has now become the check mill out here with Chicopee. Ward number 2 is this incredible. You think gerrymandering was invented in the 20th century? Nah. This, you can still tell. There's nobody down here in 5 Points. There's nobody up here in Sandy Creek. But there's still a lot of people living in the city downtown in those houses that used to line Thomas Street, Pulaski Street, and of course the big section that was demolished by urban renewal above Doherty. This section is starting to grow. Cobham, of course, has come all the way out here, almost to the General Hospital area. With the approach of streetcars, the Athens-Clarke Improvement Company is platted out here. And we're starting to grow down towards 5 Points, although 5 Points is still only 4 Points. Now, one of the aspects of this and the next map is the fantasy aspect. Remember, at this time, most of your roads are the grass-free areas where the cows walk. It's not really paved, guttered, drained, etc. And roads change. Some roads are purely speculative. I do not know how much of this ever developed down in what is now the University Drive, Morton Avenue area of 5 Points. But as you'll notice, it will change every time we put up a new slide. And I doubt if people were going, don't think people were going out and repaving the roads every 5 years. This was speculation.
Some interesting features on the map, besides the railroads coming through. Here goes the new Seaboard line, which is so influential. Down here is the old waterworks impounded for Athens to have a clean supply of water. Now, this is impounding Tanyard Branch, so the cleanliness of the water supply is questionable. Fortunately, it's not the northern branch that went up by the Tanyards, and that was the recipient of one of Athens' earliest septic sewer projects, which was running a pipe from the latrines at Old College down to dump into the branch, about where we are. Don't drink from the branch, although they changed that. Now, this water supply proved inadequate. This was an outside company, so Strawn and all sorts of energetic people have built a new treatment plant up where it is today at Linton's Pond. But look at this map again carefully. You'll see lots of interesting things going on. Now, this was such an exciting time that a couple of years later, a very energetic man, Captain J.W. Barnett, who had come in to pretty much kick us into the 20th century as city engineer, he produced his own map, and you'll notice he has his own version of what's going on down at 5 Points. That's only 2 years later. So once again, I suspect that, oops, yeah, well, that was intentional. That's comparison. He also has this incredible burgeoning town of Barberville out here off of North Avenue, which, as far as I know, never came about. So some of this is sort of fantasy development, Sim City, but Barnett is also showing up the old waterworks, the new waterworks he's proud of. There are a lot of energetic people in town: Barnett, Augustus Longstreet Hall, Charles Morton Strawn, who are making Athens one of the most progressive towns in Georgia, indeed in the U.S. This is before Columbus, Ohio, my hometown, got its really modern waterworks. We had a great pumping and filtering station, sanitation. This view of downtown by Charles Morton Strawn from one of his tireless publications mailed out to the New England Magazine and places like that kind of summarizes the incredible excitement of the town. We've got streetcars. Our Texas mules that used to pull the streetcars around have been replaced by electricity. We have arc lights appearing around town to make the night safe. And up here we have, of course, the monument to Baal. That was that's actually the standpipe for the water system to pressurize the water that stood in the middle of the street until we decoratively moved it behind the courthouse or the city hall a few years later. And there's probably people in here who remember the water tank behind City Hall. An interesting, before we roll off of here, you'll notice much of College Avenue is the same. The chocolate store, these shops here, Shackelford Building, Myers Building. Now, what has changed, it's interesting, is the Southern Mutual Building, which will become the headquarters of the Athens Electric Company, and one of the few views of the original Baptist church before the next Baptist church that was torn down was built there. So we're two Baptist churches behind the times here. So an interesting view, but everybody can tell where they are, except for the arc light. Now, part of laying down these great streets, we're almost on the side of it, to put down good streetcar tracks, lay sleepers, deal with the mud, you've got to have rocks. And to have rocks, as the B-52s would have to say, you've got to have a rock crusher. And this rock crusher is right at the end of the street here. Looking up the hill, we're up about here, I reckon. You can see the houses along Lumpkin. If you go down to the very end of Wattle Street and keep on going through the housing project, you'll walk right into the old quarry. And most people don't know it's down there, but it's an astounding space. So the rock crusher is crushing rock. Here is an 1894 map of the arc lamps and the electrical lines in red. You can see this original down there. Look how electricity is spanning out through our town. Now, this is all part of the collection Mary mentioned. If you remember nothing else, memorize the number MS 1633A. All together now? MS 1633A. What's the water course called? Tanyard Branch. Okay, we are learning. Excellent. It is full of small novelty maps and plats that show all sorts of detail, and I have more of them on display. I just wanted to throw up a couple here to give you an idea of the exciting view, the window to the past you can have with 1633A, the old city engineers papers. So our claims. Improvements. Here is a chart, you'll be able to see down there, of Boulevard being laid out, although at this point, Millage Avenue is going across the road and back to Boulevard with very shallow lots along what will become Linden. It's now Morris Avenue here. You can get a good sense of that frolicsome streetcar park that is going to be put along Park Avenue to lure nickels out of people to ride the streetcar way out to the Boulevard area. You may remember the sales brochures that point out that in this district of the park improvement, you can have water, police, all sorts of electricity, all those things you really like. But if you're hardcore on taxes, you can buy out here in the Buena Vista Boulevard edition, where it's outside of the 2-mile limit and you don't have to pay the city taxes or spend your 15 days working on the roads. Here at Rock College, University High School, or today's medical campus. It's getting so complex in Athens, we even have little convenience maps to hand out to the students. This is a map from about 1910 showing the new student at the University of Georgia, the important sites, the athletic field, the YMCA, and Lucy Cobb Institute, where the girls are. But most important, the streetcar routes. So you know where you can catch a streetcar to get around town and way out to Boulevard. By the way, high school now is labeled on the old courthouse because we've built the new courthouse downtown, which tells us this is not a 1910 edition. This is closer with the new YMCA here, must be from about 1914, 1915. But they printed these every year. We got it from all sorts of years with little features. 1909, a red letter year. Athens finally gets the tribute that makes us a real city. A firm comes down from the north and does a bird's eye view of Athens. And this is marvelous. I love this map. How is this done? Fascinating. You can't get this high up in the air in these days. Aviation, aerial photography is going to kill this business in a couple of years. We got one of the last aerial views. But in these days, this is actually done by the artist, who is a very skilled artist, walking the streets. Every view that will be in view, he makes a quick sketch of the buildings, the porches. When you're getting close, the accuracy is remarkable here. And then he goes back to his hotel room, sits down with a map, a grid of the city, and tries to imagine what it looks like if he's looking at his sketches about like this, and draws it. I am astounded by this. Books on the topic have a few of these sketches preserved, but not for Athens. What would we give to have that sheet of sketches of every building in Athens in 1909? But you know what happened? The first cold day up in Pennsylvania where they did the map, what was used to start the stove in the drafting room while they worked on this print? Alas. Here's the campus area. It gives you a sense of what's going on. The mighty at Coney here, the mill that we all know as O'Malley's down there. Cemetery Street. At this time you enter the cemetery from the north, over the railroad underpass excavations. I will say that mistakes are not made by these artists. While I praised them earlier, I do have to point out that when the person got back to his hotel room, he evidently lost the sketch for Candler Hall and left it out altogether. But, and he also got the wing on the back of the library building, today's administrative building, off center. But overall, this is an amazing view of Athens. And so, yeah, you'll see the original in the room downstairs, down the hall, but you'll also be able to read about it in the next Beyond the Pages. 1914, an aerial view. This is just one tiny bit of an aerial view because this is so huge. Shows you how Athens is booming. It also shows some traffic. I've speculated. There's nobody on the streets in this view of Athens. I've always thought it must be an away game in Atlanta or something, when everybody got on the trains. But here we see the cars, the Cotton, the Holman Hotel building, the Deloney House being crowded in by the Athenaeum, the first Coca-Cola building over where the Holiday Inn is, and if you had a good enough view, you can see a sign. Now, it must be in another view. There's one where there's an electric sign saying Coca-Cola. The sadly lost Hall Snelling House back here. And one thing I'm really fascinated by, the YMCA, before it was remodeled into the Georgia Theater. So quite a few things. Those of you who like a beer, here's the Empire Laundry, where the Globe is today. And somewhere in a dark workshop over in this area, right there in fact, the nefarious Mr. Ben Epps is working on his first airplane in that 1909 view, which of course will put the poor digital bird's eye view people out of business. But this gives a sense of how Athens is booming, traffic is growing, streetcar tracks, electricity, noise, clusters, conventions, all sorts of things going on. Now, I've been accused of putting this in just to get some legs in the show, but cars are coming in too. Yeah, it's here for the cars. Now, actually I have it here for the radiator badge. I don't know if you can read this, but the radiator badge says Athens, the classic city, Georgia. That's the first use I have seen of the classic city, and the idea that it was in a radiator badge form to put on your 25 Chevrolet when you posed out at the state normal school, I think is fabulous. Commercial message. I hope you've all been to our Athens Historical Society webpage. Have you? Any of you? Teresa Flynn and I have put up an exhibit right now on the downtown about 1913, which has a lot more views like the one we just saw. Our next exhibit we're working on is It Pays to Advertise. This is going to be the lead-in for it, without her ankles, and it's going to feature interesting advertising from former businesses in the Athens area. Well, it is getting crowded. Also, Athens is getting a little dingy, a little industrial. Here's a view of Lost River Street, approximately where Doherty goes down. You can see the railroad trestle in the background. Empty North Avenue going up across the river. The bridge is down here. And these are the houses in the Lickskillet area that are starting to crowd. And of course, the nefarious billboard, the foundry's up here. And all this Ford traffic is making a terrible din. In 1925, the city of Athens was visionary enough to realize they needed a city master plan. Can you imagine that? So they brought in the Manning firm, the Warren Manning firm of Boston, to do a plan. This consists of this book that is full of commentary, suggestions, and best of all, dystopian photographs like this one, not showing the 50th view of the Taylor Grady house, but showing you the problem areas or the sort of off-the-wall assets. Not the big tourist attractions, but the back of the scenes Athens. Fascinating. In fact, Mary and I would like the next show we do for Athens Historical Society to be focused on the Manning Report, which more people need to know about. You're going to see some of the great maps from the Manning study today. So the Manning study, fortunately, they employed, while they were here, this young undergraduate to do their legwork by the name of Felix Hargreave. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a copy of this because we don't know what happened to Athens' copy. Felix Hargreave, who is the great benefactor of the Hargreave Library, since he had done this work as a kid to work his way through college, tracked down this copy up in Roanoke, Virginia. They bought it to see how we were planning. So this beautiful, you can tell that King Tut's just been dug up when they did this. Wonderful, wonderful cover. Now, in addition to the commentary and the photographs, it is accompanied by incredible blueprint maps with their suggestions. These don't show up terribly well, but this is a map for their roadway suggestions. Look what they're doing. In 1925, they have charted a beltway almost where we ran the beltway in what, 1983, 1984? The not so much development out on this end of town, but I think that is amazing. Let's go in for a closer look, because this is something I always like to share with my historic preservation fans, and certainly I want Hubert to see this. As you can see, we've got this problem with everybody wanting to drive around with their Fords on football games. Well, here's a great idea. Why don't we do this today? We take Broad Street, and between Pope and Church, we cut 2 branches, tearing down all those rundown old houses on Reese and Deering Street, and we make Broad Street, Reese Street, and Deering Street into a traffic delta to handle all of our traffic. And yeah, think of that. The McAlexanders could sell their house for a golden pantry, maybe sell bits of the tree that owns itself, cut up for convenient souvenirs. It's interesting to me that Broad Street sort of putters out into nothing here, connecting into King Avenue, which is your big road out of town, replacing the traditional Atlanta road out Oglethorpe Avenue. Hancock sort of collects everything. Interesting concept. I frankly have no idea whatsoever what they're doing up here in what will become the Urban Renewal District, evidently trying to make sure that people couldn't find their way out of town. Not that we don't do a pretty good job of that in town even today. The park system is fabulous. And for the park system, they employed that ever brilliant advocate of a better Athens and craftsman architect, Fred Orr. He was their park advisor on this, and he's trying to find the natural assets to exploit for Athens. Let's go in a little closer, and it's fascinating. He was going to take just down from here along Cloverhurst Avenue, where the dormitories are and the apartments, and make that into a new botanical garden to replace the original botanical garden up here in the Broad Street area, which Hubert has documented so well for us. He is also wanting to retrieve some of the natural wonders of that original botanical garden by getting paths along the creeks. In 1925, Fred Orr envisioned the Greenway along the river, and wherever there is a natural flow, a chance to exploit greenery and natural beauty, he's put it in to try and make sure the classic city develops into a healthy and happy place to live. This, of course, as many of these maps will, reflects the era of segregation, and this will crop up, although they never mention in the Manning report the segregated neighborhoods. However, they do talk about the working people of the Brooklyn area, out near where Athens High School is today, Deering Extension, and mention that they will want their own park. Now, of course, we know this is a quiet Boston way of saying the parks are segregated. They don't mention that, but they do mention that they want to build a park for the working people of Brooklyn along Death Valley. So if next time you go to a Clarke Central football game, root for Cedar Shoals. That's a partisan message. But consider if it had become a park to add a little bit of lungs to the city out there. Pretty interesting consideration, I think, for 1925. I want to show this. This is the as I mentioned earlier, county maps, decent county maps are hard to come by. One of the neglected maps that tells you an incredible amount about the county is the 1927 soil survey map. This appeared in the back of the Soil Conservation Services soil survey. We'll have a copy on exhibit. The map doesn't label a great deal, but what it shows are transmission lines, highways, lost buildings, graveyards, cemeteries, schools. Wonderful array of detail. Athens is a little bit on the abstract, but you can dig out amazing things on this map. One of the questions that was kicking around a couple of years ago on growing up in Athens, that's a fun website that you can see on Facebook, I hope you've all been there, was Lake Dixie. There's ads for wonderful Lake Dixie with the band from Whitehall playing some hot jazz for you to dance. It's a dancing and swim center of the 1920s. Through this map, we wondered where it was. It didn't give an address. It's obviously near Whitehall. Through this map and another map, we were able to determine that Lake Dixie was not far from across the road where the Botanical Garden persists today. Somebody had dammed up a creek over there and partied down until they drained it and put in agricultural fields or the golf course. So check this map out, 1927. Well, that brings us up to the 1950s. By the 1930s, maps of Athens become very common. Maps of the county become fairly common. You can catch up with all of those. The map room at Maine, when it dries out, has an amazing collection of modern maps of all sorts. They also have the city directories, which can tell you more about what's in the individual houses on that map than you can imagine. So I would boost them in addition to the hard resources. But it's become fairly easy, and I'm tired of talking, and you're hungry for your brownies, and you want to see the original maps. So we're up to the 1950s, when the finest of old Athens architecture has to be torn down for the finest of modern architecture on Prince Avenue here with the original McDonald's. Things are changing, but maps are readily available to document all this. So with that, I want to invite you to follow me down. I have the keys, into the secret map room. Refreshments outside. Please do not take refreshments into the galleries, the exhibit galleries which are open, or into the map room, and we'll start kicking you all out at 5:30 because we have to close up. But Mary and I, thank you very much. How do we go from something like this to all these neat little slides we can project on the wall? The master of this sort of adjustment, Mary Linneman, is now going to tell you the secrets of her laboratory.
Hello. So this is where you see the actual maps that we have in how we make them, how we digitize them, how do we get them up there, how do we make them so you can find them on the web, or if you want to buy a scan to use for a publication, this is what happens. So this is my Book Eye scanner. It shoots, the camera's right here, so it goes up, down, and the idea is so that you don't have to keep flipping the map or the item upside down on a flatbed scanner. You'll see that this map is oversized. So what I have underneath it to help support it is an acid-free board, and that just kind of keeps it from sagging and helps protect it. And then we want to level it to make sure it's not wonky looking, because if it, level is our friend. We do not want anything unlevel. So that is why you see these little things here and here just kind of popping it up just a little bit. So that's what we do. Let's see. So here I am just kind of getting it ready. This is our program, and these are my silly socks. And so I kind of get things lined up on the scanner, and then I go to the computer, hit scan, and it does its thing. And then that's, the light sweeps from left to right. And you kind of see the light right here, and that started here and just kind of went over there. All right. So often you'll see how this map is oversized. So how do we get all this, the whole map, even though only this little bit fits? So what I have to do is often scan it in sections. So like this map I would have done in 4 parts, because you have the best part of the focus is right in the center. And then as it moves away, you have a little bit of depth of field issue. It starts to get a little soft. So I try to get as best as possible the item right as center as possible, and then digitally stitch them together in Photoshop. Usually Photoshop works really well to do it. It's very quick, but there's always the post-processing quality control. Sometimes it doesn't work. If a map has too many lines, Photoshop's not going to read it, and I have to actually sit down and look at those. I take the different scans and kind of merge them together myself and try to do it seamlessly. The idea is that you won't be able to tell. The next step, once we get the scan, what do we do with it? We have to store the file. So we have archival storage, and we have the regular archival, so regular, and then we have a backup. And it's all on tape, and this backup storage, it's very expensive. And I guess that's what I'm trying to go is, why do we not do everything? Why can't we scan everything that we own? And it's just too expensive. The tape has to be migrated over every 2 years because of technology. If you don't do it within 2 years, if you wait too long when you try to do it, your old tape might not be compatible with the new tape, and it's not going to be able to merge over there, and we'll lose it. Also, in order for these our scans to go up online, we need metadata. Metadata is just a fancy word for description. So when you go to Google and you Google a map that you might be looking for, if we don't have metadata attached to that scan, you won't find it. So it's just a pretty image online, but it doesn't do anyone any good. Excuse me. The Harvard Library has about 1.5 petabytes of data stored. To give you an idea of how much that is, 1,024 bytes is a kilobyte, 1,024 kilobytes is a megabyte, 1,024 megabytes is a gigabyte, 1,024 gigabytes is a terabyte, 1,024 terabytes is a petabyte. We have 1.5 petabytes. I'm gonna let y'all do the math because that's a lot of data. So we have to we're in charge of all those files ourselves. Microsoft, you've all heard of the cloud storage. Microsoft is not begging for our business. They cannot handle our file size or how much our data is. So we have to do this all ourselves. So that's kind of why it's just not feasible for us to do everything as much as we really, 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 really want to. We just can't. So how do we decide and pick and choose? It has to be something that can withstand being scanned. If it's going to fall apart, we can't do it. Like the map that Stephen showed you that we had to photograph. If we had tried to scan that, even if I'd gotten a giant board, you put the glass, it's gonna die. And so we just can't do it. How useful is it? Not everything is useful to everyone, so do we really want to spend the money to scan it and host it and do that? So it has to be something that is of use to people. Not that everything, it's something not useful, but it just has to be useful to a lot of people. So just to kind of give you an idea of what we do when we decide what to scan, a few years ago we did the map project where we scanned everything in our collection up to 1860, and that is online and you can search that. The only ones we didn't do is, again, ones that wouldn't be able to handle it or we didn't have copyright of. Because why put it online if we can't give you permission to use it? The Harvard Library has 40,000 cubic feet of materials. We have 250,000 volumes, including the Georgiana and Rare book. So that's just a lot of stuff. What we have coming down the line, we're currently working on, is MS 1633, and that is Athens City Records, Maps, Plans, and Blueprints. So we know that y'all want to use these maps. Y'all come in, y'all use these very often. So we said, next project, let's scan these, let's get them online, let's make it easier for y'all to have access to these materials. So that is kind of in a nutshell what we do and why we choose what we do and why we can't do everything.